They are contentious. They do not protect the rights of the minority. Just like in that congressional district, that one electoral college vote, is it not the minority? Should it not be protected? Yes. That's why a Republican form of government protects that minority. You see how that works? So had we been practicing a Republican form of government, which is guaranteed me by the Fourth Amendment, we shouldn't have had a problem in 2020, should we? We shouldn't have a problem going forward. But I can guarantee you we're going to have a problem because we're hell-bent for leather to practice democracy. And why? Because even the conservatives that we elect don't understand Federalist 10. That should be mandatory. If you're going to run as a representative, you need to know what representative government looks like. My own senator the other day voted 4 times with the Democrats. And yet he won't come explain his vote. Buddy, who are you representing? Who are you representing? Well, because sadly, he's practicing democracy and not a Republican form of government. It's a problem, and it's what's destroying our nation, this ideology of democracy. We need to start lighting that torch of republicanism, of Republican form of government. I'm not talking a political party. I'm talking an ideology. The ideology that our founding fathers gave us. A Republican form of government that absolutely requires representation to protect the rights of the minority and still serve the majority. It's the only way. It's the only way of dealing with the effects of faction. Democracies deal with the causes, and that doesn't work. In there, Madison talks about religious passion. Does anybody know where the separation clause is in the Constitution? Separation between church and state, where's it at? Anybody?
Not there.
It doesn't exist. So why do we hear it so much? Well, where it came from was a letter between Madison and Thomas Jefferson. There was one central church in Virginia. Well, what did Madison say? Religious faction can be a dangerous thing to the rights of the minority, right? Because a deep-seated belief can cause people to do things that are not good for their neighbors. Thomas Jefferson himself said, if there's one church, they will certainly usurp the government to rule the people. And if there's 2, they will slice each other's throats for the privilege. That's why there needs to be many. That's why in Article 1 it says there shall be no religious test. Because we're trying to deal with the effects of faction. Because faction is the enemy of all popular government. And the more we practice democracy, the more faction we're going to have. And that's why democracies have very violent deaths. Because of that faction. That passion over reason. Are there any questions? Comments? Concerns? Go ahead.
I've got a comment on what you were saying. You were saying that these people need to represent their people and not the oligarchy. Well, if we don't get involved in what's going on, and I don't mean just us in this room, but encourage people and mentor people, it's probably already over, but just so you know, our state legislators, most of them are involved in something called the National Conference for State Legislators. And that's where they're getting their agendas to pass the laws that they're passing without speaking a statute in the state of Indiana for statewide policy for law enforcement, so there's no more local law enforcement, and soon no constitutional sheriff running your county, possibly. It's already happened in 2 states.
Yep.
And we're not a very big state either. So if they can do it in Delaware and Rhode Island within a matter of years, it's right around the corner. They just opened up a branch in the Law Enforcement Academy that's called POST, which means they will bring their statewide policy to the local sheriffs, the local police departments through this POST that they've already established. And what they're trying to do is to make it so if the sheriffs, which are constitutionally elected, do not adopt their statewide policy, then they can decertify the police officers or the deputies and their training in that department. So it's getting very serious. 41 states have passed legislation that's similar, and it's all coming through this national conference for state legislators. So if you're not talking to your legislator, I suggest we all do it.
If you want to see how bad that policy is, I direct you to look north. Michigan has that. All of our officers we train to the war zone in Detroit. And then we can't understand why the citizens get treated the way they get treated in Hillsdale. It's not Detroit. It's not Detroit. It's Hillsdale. One size doesn't fit all. Democracies try to make one size fit all, because what's it trying to do? Trying to get everybody the same thing. They're trying to deal with the effects of faction by giving everybody the same thing. Doesn't work. Madison tells us so.
They call it making it fair.
Yep, it doesn't make it fair. One of the most unfair things you can do is give everybody the same thing, right? That's why capitalism works and free market works. Those that work hard and produce more get to keep more. Those that produce nothing get nothing. The Bible even says if you don't work, you don't eat. It's a natural law. So what happens in socialist countries where everybody gets the same thing no matter what they produce? There is no incentive to produce, right? We've got the same problem in America right now because of 2020. Michigan has turned so socialistic that they cannot find people to work. It's like feeding a stray dog. Seems like a good thing to do. It's good-hearted. But now you can't get rid of the stray dog. Why? Because he's at your doorstep all the time. You ever go into the national forests and there's signs, don't feed the bears? Ask one of the Mounties, why can't we feed the bears? He said, because if you do that, they won't be able to protect themselves. They won't be able to get their own food, and they'll die. Hello? What are you doing in America? What are you doing? Stop feeding the bears. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have local welfare, that we take care of those that can't. We should always take care of orphans and widows and men who can't provide for their families because they've had an accident or something unfortunate happen. But the problem is when we don't do it local, the system gets abused, doesn't it? And I get this all the time. Well, you're one of those Republicans, John. You're just cold-hearted. You don't want to help people. Goodness gracious, I've helped more people than most progressives have. I'll go out of my way to help people. But I'll do it locally. I get this all the time. I got the National Fraternal Order of the Police called me the other day. Would you give $15 a month? I said, no. What do you mean, no? I would much rather take care of an officer in my community. If something happens to him, I'll donate to his family and him. before I'll give to a national fraternal order. What are you going to do with the money? Well, we're going to pay a CEO $160,000, and we're going to advertise, and we're going to give out free things. And no. How does that help my local officer if something happens to him? Doesn't. I'd much rather give my money local. So I'm not heartless. I just understand the human condition. A lot like our founding fathers did. And I've realized what truth is. When we deny truth, we live a lie. And we've been living a lie for a very long time. You don't want one size fits all. Each republic should have its own character, just like each person has its own character. And each republic needs to be represented by its character. One size doesn't fit all. And it never should. Do you think everybody in this county, if we were to take people from, let's say LA, and bring them here and put them here, and half the people from this county and take them over and put them in LA, think everything would be hunky-dory? No. Absolutely not. Well, should the people in LA be able to live the way they want to live? Absolutely. But should the people in DeKalb be able to live the way they want to live? Absolutely. See, when one size fits all, what happens is people in Alaska get bathing suits because everybody in Hawaii did. Or everybody in Hawaii gets parkas because everybody in Alaska did. See how bad that is? Doesn't work. And I know that's the extreme, but I say that to demonstrate the principle. Doesn't work. One size doesn't fit all. So, are there any other questions, comments, concerns? Go ahead.
While you were talking about elections and things going wrong and such, I don't think you've ever explained to this group about your last election and you called for a recount, help them teach.
Yeah, that's a story for another day. That's a whole
Okay.
dissertation. But yeah, even in Hillsdale, home of Hillsdale College, elections get fixed. And we know it. In fact, I was in court today, and we filed an amicus brief by the attorney from MIGOP, and one of their concerns was what had happened at the county clerk's office. And they have basically told us that there will be an investigation into our county clerk for fixing elections.
Mm-hmm.
She's a Republican, so she says. So, it even happens in Hillsdale.
They were denounced though from the state.
Yes.
party, right?
Yes, they were censured and denounced. All they had to do was end the lawsuit today, and they didn't. So thereby, my brief said that's a guarantee that they no longer want to be Republicans because they had that opportunity. So there it is. So, all right, next week is going to be on, let me go back to my, it's going to be on Federalist 24. Federalist 24 is an interesting one. Its title is "The Powers Necessary to the Common Defense Further Considered." Now you're going to see, as you start reading the Federalist Papers, you can group 2 or 3 in a get together because you'll see that it's a continuing argument. And then they'll switch gears and they'll talk about something else, and it might be 4 or 5 Federalist Papers that cover that subject. That's like with this 10, it says "further considered," because that argument starts earlier. But 10 is a very powerful one. That's one that everybody needs to pay attention to. The difference between a republic and a democracy, and why democracies are horrible forms of government. So this is why it drives me nuts every time I hear, I like Tucker Carlson a lot, but it drives me nuts every time I hear him call, this democracy or democratic form of government.
Are they doing that though to save the job?
I don't know if they're doing it to save their job, or the problem is we have changed words through history, and in universities, we teach them different, right? Think about this. If in the 80s they said, hey, that's a pretty bad motor scooter, somebody'd go, thank you. But if in the 1920s I was to tell somebody, hey, that's a bad motor scooter, I'm gonna get punched. See, phrases can change, and that's our problem. Semantics. God said he gave us the word. If you think about it, we're the only one of God's creations that speak. Why is that? Because the word is truth, and he gave us the word. Words have meanings, and we've got to be better keepers of the word. All word. So it's important. Words have meanings. So, thank you all. Be careful on the way home, and we'll see you here next week for Federalist 24. And I'm going to go home and celebrate my wife's birthday because today's her birthday.